Janade Sahib, this distinguished audience, I'm greatly honored to stand up in front of you and share a vision which I hope becomes a movement and the belief in peace is vindicated ultimately. But the way the question has been posed, India-Pakistan peace in our lifetime, question mark. The question is whose lifetime? We have people who are about 20, 30 years younger than me, and so what may not be possible for me could be very much possible for them. So, but I would still want to believe that this is possible within my own lifetime. And what is this based on? On a very simple experience that I've gone through, and that is that first I was invited to Lahore, Pakistan, which is my hometown, to speak on a book which challenges the very nitty-gritty on which the Pakistani state is based, and that is on Jinnah. Jinnah, his successes, failures, and role in history. And it's actually a Penguin publication originally, but then published by Vanguard Books, Lahore, of Najam Sethi, and recently the Urdu translation has also been published. And I was invited, every year in January in Lahore we have this literary festival called Think Fest. So they invited me to come and talk about my book, and two of the leading lawyers of Pakistan were prepared with a brief to question my positions and so on. And I must say that having written the book, I could sense the consequences which a hostile audience in Pakistan could create, but the great surprise was that everything went on in a very civilized manner. And although the two lawyers, Salman Raja and Asad Rahim Khan, had come up with very strong arguments in favor of Jinnah and his role in history, they considered all important points which I took up. Like, for example, that it is not Mahatma Gandhi who brought religion into politics. Rather, religion was already in politics, but he tried to bring the best in all religions, which was emphasizing the shared common humanity. So that point they conceded. And the second point I took up was that the so-called persecution of Muslims during the Congress ministries was fraudulent, sort of two reports. They were without substance, and Viceroy Lilithgow admitted that I'm going to tell Jinnah that there is no substance in the accusations made against the Congress governments. So these two important points they conceded, but in the end they tried the rhetoric by saying, wasn't Jinnah right? Because look at what is happening to Muslims in Narendra Modi's India. Now I must say that on that occasion I didn't know how to handle, because this happened in the last 2 or 3 minutes and then the discussion came to an end. But subsequently, when I had to face this question wherever I went, then I said, did not Mr. Jinnah say on the 30th of March 1941 in Kanpur that that he will make 2 crore 20 million Muslims experience martyrdom and get smashed in order to liberate 7 crore or 70 million from the tutelage of the Hindu Congress? So one. And then I said, Jinnah Saab's whole campaign in favor of Pakistan was based on the allegation or the fear that in a united India, Islam will be annihilated and Muslims will be obliterated. So we need Pakistan to protect both. And are we not now duty bound, like Israel, to open the borders of Pakistan and let all persecuted Indian Muslims seek refuge? And I noticed that question disappeared in all subsequent meetings which I addressed. So wherever I went in 9 weeks, I addressed 27 public audiences, all sorts. Islamabad, Lahore is of course my home city, so I had local support as well. Karachi, Hyderabad, Sindh, Sargodha. And people were very eager to get another perspective on what went or what happened during the freedom struggle and the partition and so on. So I realized that the people did want to have a good, friendly relationship with the people of India. And then I was invited here by Vasant Vakhian Mala, and the topic was the tale of two friends lost in a fair, India-Pakistan trajectories, and how should they deal with each other. So as soon as I announced that I'm coming, I was inundated by so many invitations, and I've been able to avail of a portion of them, and so many I couldn't, because I'm now nearly exhausted and want to go back after nearly 3 months. So the amount of respect, affection, warmth I have received in India only proves that the Pakistani people and the Indian people at heart do not bear that venom, that hatred which official ideology prescribes. So that is where the hope is, that as soon as we can question some of the things which happened in the past, look at the present and present some alternative to this current situation, hopefully things will start improving. Pakistani YouTubers, I think, are very brave. They live in Pakistan and dare to ask questions which are calling into question the official narrative of Pakistan. And in India also, I find that by and large, the goodwill is part of the way human beings always behave under normal circumstances. So now the question, India-Pakistan peace in our lifetime? I think yes, my lifetime. I am of course using it in a symbolic manner. Because you know, whenever you look at social science or any science or any study of human beings and culture, there are two ways you can approach it. Either you assume that human beings are estranged in their essence, and therefore no matter what you try, they will always be finding excuses for hostility and so on and so forth. Or the alternative position, which is that human beings are basically united in their essence, and all we need to do is to bring the common humanity forward, and as soon as we are in a position to do it, we can change things for the better. And obviously I subscribe to the latter position. But looking at the past, is there any basis for optimism? Yes and no. The yes part is like this, that twice the Indian government offered Pakistan a no-war pact. But Pakistan said that such a pact would not be possible as long as the Kashmir issue is not resolved. And then, after India and China had gone to war, then General Ayub Khan, Field Marshal Ayub Khan, offered a no-war pact. And then the Indian government took the position, this no-war pact is against whom? Because by that time Pakistan had entered NATO, CENTO and military alliances with the United States. So 3 efforts were made already to contain the damage which was done from 1939 37, especially until the partition took place, in which the two-nation theory, which had been on the margins since 1847, suddenly was catapulted into the mainstream because of a number of events, for which we don't have time to go through. But 37 onwards till 47, all that could be used to create suspicion, hatred of the other was used, and I would say it's standing here essentially by the Muslim League and by Muhammad Ali Jinnah. I have quoted all his speeches where all this is present. Of course, from the Indian side, we had statements of Savarkar coming to the same conclusion as the Muslim League, and we had the even more hostile statement of Gawalkar, saying that we should learn from the Germans how they have treated the Jews, and non-Muslims and non-Hindus in India would be treated the same way. They can't accept equal citizenship, not even second-rate citizenship. So these positions were tossed around from 1857 on from both sides. We have Iqbal saying this in 1930 and Chaudhry Rahmat Ali saying the same. But after the 1936-7 elections, when the Congress got a mandate in the Hindu majority provinces, and the Muslim League was routed in the Muslim majority provinces. The Congress got in the Hindu majority provinces, plus in the most Muslim majority province of that time, the Northwest Frontier province. But the Muslim League was rejected by the people of Punjab, Sindh, and those areas. But then a number of events happened, of which we have no time to go through. But from 1940 onwards, the Muslim League had decided to work towards the partition of India, and although many offers were made by the Congress to sort of build trust and so on, but I think the Muslim League had decided that it will go for the partition, and it's the British finally who weighed the two positions and decided that a partitioned India with a Pakistan based on Islamic ideology, and as they say, I've quoted, armed with British science, would be the best guarantee to keep South Asia safe from the spread of Soviet communism. So you see, if we go back in the past, it's the fear of the spread of Soviet communism which was defining the politics of those times. Even after the Second World War, it became the main focus of the Cold War, how the world was pushed in either joining one or the other camp. There, India continued having its independent foreign policy and non-aligned movement, and Pakistan entered the military pact. So even in foreign sort of sphere, these two states which had separated in a very gory, in a very bloody manner, with 1 million people killed, of which 80% were from Punjab, 14 to 15 million people forced to leave their homes in search of safe havens on the other side, of which once again 10 million were just Punjabis. The partition bequeathed this experience of violence and hatred and so on. So on both sides, this experience became part of their way of dealing with one another. And then we have, of course, the 19... So when we look at some of the efforts made towards peace, the best example is the 1962 Indus Water Treaty, which was a deal between Pakistan and India, and despite all the 3-4 wars and this constant tension and so on, that water treaty has been maintained by both sides, with some objections here and there. So there are examples where the two states have shown an interest in building peace, and there is a good example of how this sharing of water has been a success story. 1965, in my opinion, is the turning point where these efforts and the old type of leaders who knew one another uh, by age and all sort of started receding and new things happened. And after the 65 war in Pakistan, a curtain came down, I think on both sides. And then we didn't know what was happening in India except through the newspapers and maybe radio. And of course, Indian films and Pakistani films and so on. Culture-wise, things still continued. But after 65 war, even that source was denied to people in Pakistan. And then I think the 71 war is where Pakistan comes up with this argument that, look, India never wanted Pakistan ever to stabilize, and when they got the opportunity, they broke up Pakistan. And so a more militant type of Pakistan ideology based on Islamic ideas and so on began to receive patronage of the state, cultivation by the state, and some accidents in history impacted on this, aggravating the situation. In 1978, you have the communist state come to power in April in Afghanistan. In February 1979, a fundamentalist regime comes to power in Iran. And in 1997, earlier, General Ziaul Haq had captured power in Pakistan. So this area was, I think, radicalized already in the late 70s, the Afghan Jihad and so on. Later on, after that Afghan Jihad came to an end in 1890-89, Pakistan started sending these terrorists, Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, into the Indian Kashmir, and even they struck targets within India, like Mumbai twice, I think even more places in Maharashtra, in Punjab, in Delhi, and so many areas. And Pakistan alleges that there was an Indian hand already in Balochistan, although they have never been able to apprehend someone except this Yadav, who's the commander in the Navy, and then the case is still going on. So this sort of animosity between those two states has sort of grown with time rather than being reduced in its intensity. And then I would say that in the process, what we note is that while all this was happening, India remained steadfast to its constitution. It was able to institutionalize the democratic process, and despite the emergency 2 years, things came back to their sort of practice. And in the 90s, India even liberalized its economy, and now it's a great growing economic power. There is no denying about it. Wherever I go, I see so much industry, so much development having taken place. So my argument is that Indian governments may have ideological differences, and they most certainly do, but keeping the national interest in focus in the policies of the government has always been there. And so after 76 years, I would say India is a success story, given that the cultural, ethnic, religious, sectarian cults and so on, despite all this variegation and diversity, India remains one and is strong, and it's from 9 states, it has become 29 states. So there is a process whereby the Indian state does contain demands for separate representation and empowerment and so on. The only condition is that any area trying to secede from India is crushed with all the power the state has at its disposal. Like the Kashmir issue and Khalistan and elsewhere. So on the whole, India is doing very well all round. Its education policy, thanks to Jawaharlal Nehru and Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, who together, I think, set up the basic higher education institutions and created the bases upon which modern India has grown. Although in the polemics going on in India, that is very often forgotten. But I would insist that without Nehru, there wouldn't be the modern India on which others have come and contributed. So I find this continuity in the Indian case. What happened to Pakistan? I think in Pakistan, finding arguments as a lawyer, Jinnah, I think, was a past master. Any argument which helped him divide Hindus and Muslims and Congress and Muslim League, he used with a relish. And in my book, I have ad infinitum, shown that this is the case, and it's a myth that Jinnah never wanted the partition, and Nehru especially forced it upon Pakistan, on Jinnah. I've shown that it has no basis. It's a thesis passed by the Cambridge University and without any evidence being given in the book. So the way we look upon Cambridge and these places, we have to reconsider how theses are passed and so on without fulfilling the essential needs of substantiating your claims with proper proof. Anyhow, Pakistan having come into being, then the problem was it was a state for the Muslims with some minorities, and those minorities were alienated ipso facto. It's a state for Muslims in which minorities also live, but they are not part of the nation. Simple as that. Technically, they may have a Pakistani passport, but the way the nation was defined, it was the Germanic model. I say there are two models of nationalism. One, the French, which is territorial nationalism. All those born on a territory are part of the nation, irrespective of their religion, caste, language, ethnicity, and so on. So it's an inclusive idea of a nation. And the German model is that you are part of a nation either through race or through belief or some other particularistic aspect. And I think Pakistan came into being as a state for the Muslims. But then the problem was that if Hindu society was divided on the basis of caste, Muslim society was deeply divided on the basis of sect and subsects. And so all these years the effort has been to somehow make Pakistan democratic and Islamic. And in my doctoral thesis, which is not very often mentioned, but which I think is the basic framework through which all other books have emerged, is the concept of an Islamic state and analysis of the ideological controversy in Pakistan, where I could demonstrate that you can use the Quran and Sunnah or the Hadith the way you want. Like a magic wand, on one hand you can argue that in Islam everything has been laid down or worked out. So all you need to do is to enforce or implement the Quranic message. So no need for a parliament, for democracy or any other sort of law, everything is given. And then on the other end, the other pole of this discussion are those who quote that Prophet Muhammad, it's a famous hadith of his saying, that when I tell you something about this world, then I'm just a human being. But when I tell you something about the spiritual world, then follow me. So from there they argue that the Prophet himself divided the world into the temporal and the spiritual. So a secular state is possible while it is also an Islamic state. And I've said this is a great achievement of playing with words, circumlocution and so on, decorative sort of exercises. The conclusion I draw is that either you can be a democracy or you can be an Islamic State. You can't be, or you are either, what you are doing now is that you are fish and fowl together, and that doesn't work. So if you are into an Islamic State, then go for an Islamic State and take all the responsibilities which such a state then imposes on the rulers. And for example, I give, recently in Karachi, a Hindu mandir was attacked and brought down and so on. But fortunately, the Supreme Court has intervened. And but the example is that when Muhammad bin Qasim came to Sindh, there was a problem now how to deal with the Hindus, Buddhists and Jains who became the subject people. So he sent this problem to Damascus, which was then the capital of the Umayyad Caliphate, for a ruling according to the Islamic point of view, how should we deal with these people? And the ulama or the fuqaha, the scholars of Islam at that time, used the method in Islamic law known as qiyas, which is analogy. And through that process, they argued that the people of India believe in the same God as the Arabs and others do. So we extend the same idea, because in the Quran there is a verse which says that the people of the book, Jews, Christians and Sabians, can live among Muslims peacefully. They can hold on to their religion, they can carry on their businesses as long as they pay the jizya, which is the protection tax. But once you pay the jizya, then you are not required to take part in the holy wars of the Islamic State. So that's a trade-off. So already Muhammad bin Qasim came with a ruling which explains why, and this I tell my attackers in India who find Islam and Muslims just doing all that was wrong, that in the 700 years or so when the Muslims were ruling northern India at least, by the time Muslim rule came to an end, only 19% of the Indian population had converted to Islam. Of course, I am told that Hinduism has a resilience which nobody else has, and I'm sure that point also needs to be accepted. But it could not have been a very oppressive, and we know it wasn't, because only today we were discussing how Akbar and all these rulers were in the habit of carrying everyone with them. And who fought the wars for the Mughals, if not the Rajputs and so on? All that story is too well known. But in currently India, of course, there is a reaction the way Pakistan has, crafted its narrative, saying, and this is a statement by the way of Jinnah, on I think 8th or 10th of March 1944 in Aligarh, that when the first Indian converted to Islam, he was ostracized by his community, and that's when the foundation of Pakistan was laid. So the way Pakistan's origin is explained can be anything like Muhammad bin Qasim or the first Indian converting and so on. So going back to Mohenjo-daro and the Vedic period is therefore left aside. So that sort of narrative is now, I think, getting its echo in Indian situations, but I'm hoping that Indian people would be able to maintain the high standard of inquiry and so on, which is the great asset of the secular state which India became in 1947 and so on. So now, at the current situation, what is the hope? And here I bring in Hobbes. You see, Hobbes has a theory about human nature. He says human beings by nature are aggressive, they seek power and glory. And in the state of nature, everybody is equal and free. So when everybody is equal and free, it's a war of all against all, because if I don't get up and attack Professor Ranade, he'll get up and attack me. So what do? I attack first. But this attacking first leaves everybody insecure and unprotected. And then Hobbes said that this sort of experience says that there is another part to human nature, and that is the rationality of survival. So the human beings in that imaginary state of nature decided to set up a civil state under law and gave the sovereign the right to tell us what rights we enjoy, how much freedom we enjoy, so that peace could be established and security could be established. So my argument is that Pakistan has been on a self-destructive course for too long. I call it nihilism. It's a word I love sharing with people because as a teacher I think adding to vocabulary is also part of my duty. Nihilism explains Pakistan's dilemma. The way they make policies are self-defeating. Like, teachers of physics and so on are told that when you go to the class, do tell them about Copernicus, Galileo and so on, but say that this is the one theory, but we have to believe the creationist theory of the Quran and the Bible and so on. So the teacher is then just explaining a theory without intellectually getting involved in that. And I think that is the type of harm you do to your own people by denying them a chance to get modern education and move forward. So Pakistan has to rectify its current situation, which has led to the economic crisis. Pakistan is facing, I think, practically, virtually, it is insolvent. It's bankrupt since a long time. And you find $1 billion loan and people celebrate it. This is quite, perverted way of dealing with your tragedy, which makes me very sad. I'm at heart very much a Lahori and a Punjabi, and I don't want my people there to be in this very stupid situation. But who is responsible for this? It's Pakistan's establishment, they call it the deep state, the rogue element and so on, who have been responsible for not giving the Pakistani people a chance to think independently, think in their best interest. But now that ruling class, I don't think, can reproduce itself as it did in the past. The Americans were always there to bail them out. Then came the Saudis when they had a conflict with Iran. Now we are left only with China. And China, as we all know, if they give 1 rupee, they want 2.5 in return. So that's not going to be very helpful. And I do hope that in Pakistan, people like these YouTubers and very brave people who live in Pakistan. I was there for 9 weeks and got away by saying all these things. But when you live there and you have a family to take care of, then I think it's a lot of courage, and that courage is there in the people of Pakistan. So what can we do if we come to some of the recommendations? One would be to convince both India and Pakistan to let people 65 plus get visa easily and visit the other side. When you don't meet people, you can either idolize them or you can demonize them. It's only when you meet people that you find it's a mix. So that would be one thing. Second would be something very close to that. We have to encourage, because of the social media and so on, panel discussions on both sides, where Indian scholars and Pakistanis take part. I have had an experience which is not all that promising. We had a discussion on the partition, and we have a group in Amsterdam called the Overseas Progressive Pakistanis. So we tried to recruit some of the leading Indian scholars, but they didn't respond. They didn't want to take part in it. And on one or two other occasions also, they shied away. Whereas the Pakistanis, a few of us, are always willing to come up and share what we think is wrong with Pakistan and what we think India can also be doing wrong to itself. But in India, there is, of course, one reason to say this is that in the recent free press index, India is 161 and Pakistan is 150. So in some ways, we are freer than what is going on in India. There's a lot of self-censorship which prevails here. Why? We don't know. So Pakistan must also drastically revise its textbooks, the educational curriculum. It is full of hatred of Hindus and India. And I'm not the first one. It was Professor K.K. Aziz who wrote the book, The Murder of History. Of course, when he wrote this, he had to leave Pakistan, and I think the later part of his life he was in the UK. Maybe then he came back and so on. And then others have done similar work on the textbooks and shown how the gross distortion, obfuscation of facts is taking place in Pakistan. And then with time they introduce more of Islam in the educational process. From what I know, the new educational policy requires even BA level students, BSc level students to memorize or learn 30 chapters of the Quran and Hadith literature. And I'm saying this is no way of developing a love for Islam, because you force it on people to pass an exam, and that's not the way you actually create a deep-rooted love for anything, when you force people into that. But that's the way Pakistan is doing. The third, I would say then, is trade. We should all encourage trade between India and Pakistan. Of course, India also benefits from it, because if the land route is granted, Wagah and Atari, and in Sindh there are some places, and Hussainiwala and Kasoor on our side in Punjab, I think a lot of benefit would take place. Professor Rajmohan Gandhi once in his book From Aurangzeb to Mountbatten has actually devoted a whole chapter showing that if the two Punjabs were to start trading and cooperating, then this region would once again emerge as a great economic power. And obviously India is, with Maharashtra being a leading force and many other parts of India, this would only add to India's upward movement. I say the takeoff stage of Rusto is now for India. Pakistan, which is in such a bad shape, would greatly benefit from it, and we'll get things cheaper. We can also try to market our goods in the much bigger Indian market. You know, ever since I've come, I've been getting messages from Pakistan, from justices and so on. And one gentleman, Noor Muhammad Kasuri, who along with another leading industrialist, they have prepared a charter showing if India-Pakistan trade were to happen, how much Pakistan would benefit greatly. So these arguments are all there among people who are responsible and informed. Ultimately, Pakistan has to give up its extremism. All forms of terrorism have to be eradicated. I think that precondition from India is an imperative one, and Pakistan should do that convincingly. Once that happens, what is then the Kashmir issue? There my position is, look, we have had 4 wars on Kashmir, and no war has settled this issue. So why not understand the way history behaved? You know, just for your information, actually Jinnah Sahab spurned 3 attempts from India to say, you keep Kashmir, we keep Hyderabad. I gave all those examples in my book. It's Jinnah who didn't accept it, because he wanted not only Kashmir but Hyderabad and Junagadh. Ultimately we got none. So that is also a heresy for me to bring out, that it's Jinnah who is responsible and not anyone else in Pakistan who lost Kashmir in a peaceful sort of exchange of this and that. So with all the information, so what is the basis on which I build my optimism? I think at least for my work and what so many of my Pakistani friends are doing, YouTubers and writers, and in India, of course, many. Ultimately, the truth is, God is not truth, truth is God. So once you bring up the truth and you share it, good people will respond to it. And I think your presence is a very good vindication of what I'm saying. Thank you so much.